Restore databases. So the restoration and recovery process is pretty straightforward. There are a few things we need to look out for, but it's really going to depend on the type of backup strategy we implemented as far as the type of restore we can do and how granular we can get with our restoration. For instance, if our backup strategy only includes full backups every night, then we'll only ever be able to do a complete database restore based on the most recent full backup. On the other hand, if we do differential or transaction log backups, then we'll be able to recover to a point in time within the differential or within our log chain. Looking at our Nugget overview, we're going to jump right over to the virtual Nugget lab and learn how to do this stuff because there's really not a lot of theory or concepts involved with restoring databases. It's more of knowing how to do it, the different ways to do it, and things to look out for when you're doing it. So we'll jump right over to the virtual Nugget lab. We'll continue on from our backup Nugget where we implemented a few backup strategies. We'll use those backups and restore them. So we'll look at how to do a local restore. So say our production database became corrupted or a developer forgot a where clause or something bad happened to it. How do we restore it back based on the most recent backup and our backup strategy? And then we'll also take a look at how to restore a database on a different instance than the one that it was backed up on or the one that it lives on because there are some things to look out for. We have to be wary of the data files and where they go. We're also going to take a look at how to restore encrypted databases. In fact, we're going to learn about this in the middle of our restoring databases segment because when we move that database from our backup onto a new instance, which is going to be our Nugget Demo DB, that Nugget Demo DB database that we've been working with for a while now has been encrypted since we learned about transparent data encryption in the beginning of the series. So in order to even do that, we're going to need to figure out how to get our certificates over onto the new server. So we'll back up and we'll restore our certificates onto the new server, and then we'll restore that encrypted database onto a new instance. We'll also take a look at how to do point-in-time restoration. Really neat stuff and really easy to do as far as the restoration process goes. But how granular we can get, how close we can get to that point in time is going to depend on our backup strategy. So we'll take a look at a few scenarios there. And finally, we'll take a look at how to do file group, and page restoration. So if your backup strategy includes specific files or file groups, it's good to know how to restore based on that. And also, another good use here for file and page restore is if you ever have any corrupted pages in your database or maybe even a corrupted file. It's good to know how to just restore those files or specific or fix those pages because it's a lot faster than restoring the entire database. So why don't we head over to the Virtual Nugget Lab and learn how to restore databases. Home sweet home in the Virtual Nugget Lab. So I've pre-launched Management Studio, and if we open it up here, I also loaded our solution, added a project called 14-Restore, just a few scripts we're working with. We have a connection here to our eval instance, and then I also opened up our support files folder. Now back when we did our backup nugget, we created a maintenance plan which automated a backup strategy for us. So that backup strategy and all the backups lie inside of the backup folder, inside of our Nugget Demo DB folder, and here it is. Here are all the backups that have been running. So this one takes a full backup once a week, a differential once a day, and then transaction logs every half hour. So the full backup didn't actually occur yet, which means, if you also remember, in our backup nugget, we created a copy only, full number 2, which was the last full backup to happen on the system that our sneaky developer went and took without telling us. Well, thankfully, we actually have that backup. So that's going to be our most recent full backup. And then from there, we're going to start utilizing all the backups from our backup strategy. So the first thing I want to show you here is how to just back up and restore the existing production database. So we're not talking about moving it to another server. We're just saying something happened, something bad happened, and we need to restore our database immediately. So what we can do is head to our production database, which for us is going to be on our eval instance, right-click on it, head into tasks, and head down to restore. And we're going to choose database. So the first thing we need to do here is just verify the source of our backups. Now what's cool here is if you did any of your backups through Management Studio or through a maintenance plan, then SQL will keep track of the most recent valid backups that we can use to restore. If not, if you did it through Transact SQL or another means to utilize your backup strategy, then you can hit Device here and browse to all of your backup files. But the only thing here is, there could be a lot of invalid backups. Like we have down here in our Nugget Demo DB folder, a lot of these backups are invalid because, say, for instance, our most recent differential backup invalidated all the transaction logs and everything else in there. So what we would need to do is make sure that we get the last differential, and then any transaction logs that have happened since the last differential. So that's why it's good to always have a delete or an archive script that moves old backups away from your production backup directory here. So it's clear when you do things like this that you're choosing the right stuff. Even though SQL will yell at us, because if we chose old transaction logs in here, let's just choose a few of them, hit OK, hit OK again, it's going to verify them and then tell us, oh, sorry, there's a break in the log sequence chain there. So thankfully we did this through a maintenance plan, so it makes it very easy for us to just have SQL do it for us. So it picks our most recent full, our most recent differential, and then all the transaction logs. And by the way, back in our backup directory, it's choosing our full backup 2 right there, and then it's choosing our most recent differential, which is right here, and then all of the transaction logs. All right, so that's what SQL sees as the most recent and valid backups. From there, we just need to verify our destination. And again, we're overwriting the database, so that's why these are the same. If you wanted to restore this to a different database on the same server, you could just give it a new name here. And the only thing to look out for here will be the data files, which I'll explain shortly. But we're going to overwrite the existing database, so we will do that. And then you can also specify a point in time. We'll cover that when we get there. And then you just have some good information down here relating to each backup. So when they happen, the size of them, there's your log sequence numbers in there, who did it, and then if there's an expiration, it'll also be on there. So good information about your backups. And if you didn't want to choose a specific one for whatever reason, you know that the last transaction log had somebody forgot their where clause and messed up all of our production data, then we could uncheck that one. So if we head over to the Files tab here, again, if you're restoring over the existing database, you won't have to worry about it because you're just going to overwrite the data files. That's essentially what you'll be doing. But if you are restoring to a different database on the same server, then you want to make sure that you rename your data files so you don't overwrite your existing ones. And you can even, instead of do all of them differently, you can do it very easily here, and just specify to relocate them all to the same folder. And in doing this, obviously you won't get the granularity of being able to put it on different drives. But if it's a test database and you just want to test out lodging things, probably not a big deal. But keep that in mind. Otherwise, you can just go in here and browse through your restore as and give it a different name. So you could even just add, Nugget Demo DB test on the end of these if we were doing our test database. All right. The next area here is options, and we want to click overwrite the existing database because we are overwriting a database. This isn't going to be restored as a brand new database. You also have some setting here to deal with replication if you want to keep your replication settings in the database. Also, if you want to restrict the database to restricted user, owners of the DBO role, it'll keep it there until you specifically take it off. And then the recovery state is important. Now, because we're doing all of this in one shot, you can't really see it here. When we script this out, I actually have a script doing exactly what the dialog is here doing. You'll be able to see, because after every single one of these, so after our first one runs, it's going to set it to no recovery, and it's going to put no recovery for every single one up until the very last backup is restored. Then it's going to switch it to restore with recovery. So no recovery just basically means the database is not operational, inaccessible, because we're telling it we're not done yet. Also good for piecemeal restores, because you're restoring your databases in stages based on all of your backups. Let's switch this back to restore with recovery. We want our database fully operational once the last backup has been restored. You can also do restore as standby, which will leave our database in a read-only state between restores. All right, so at least it's somewhat operational. Also notice the tail log backup. And a tail log backup, what this will do again is get anything in the transaction log, any activity that's happened in our database since the last transaction log backup. So this is kind of our last ditch effort to get everything that's happened in the database up until this point. So you can do that. You can also leave the source then in a restoring state. That way nothing else can happen to it, and we will totally be synced up. And you can also specify a location there for that tail log backup. Now in our case, if we were restoring from an oops, we probably wouldn't do a tail log backup, because we would restore to a specific transaction log or even a specific point in time. So in that sense, the log chain would be broken, and we wouldn't need to do that. But just for completeness here, we're going to take a tail log backup. We'll leave the source database in the with no recovery state. But again, that'll just be overwritten anyway because we're overwriting the database and we're already with recovery. So the last log will put it back online. We can also force close any existing connections to the destination database, and then we can prompt before restoring each database. We look good here, so let's hit OK. And what it'll do is it'll start restoring with our full first. Nice that it gives us a little progress bar. You can even stop it if you'd like to. But once our full is done, it's going to switch over into our differential. And then it'll do all the transaction log backups. So right now, if we were to right click on this database and hit refresh, look at our state. See, our state is in no recovery mode because, oh, wrong one, because it's still restoring. All right, so when it's done applying the last transaction log, it'll put it into recovery mode and it'll be back online and accessible just like all of our other production databases. So it's ripping through our transaction log backups right now and restoring them one by one. As soon as it's done, it'll close out of the dialog for us. It'll refresh our databases and you'll see our restoring disappear. So we should be pretty close now. There was only about 15 or so. Oh, there we go. Look at that. So it's done. It just kind of disappeared and our database is back online and fully functional. Now let's say that we wanted to take our Nugget Demo DB backups and restore them onto a completely separate instance of SQL Server. We've got a special case because our Nugget Demo DB database is encrypted. So if we just go to the properties here and down into the options and scroll down to the bottom, we can see that we have encryption turned on. So what that means is the server cert, the certificate that this database was encrypted with will need to be moved over to our destination instance first. And the certificate I'm talking about here, the one that we created back when we learned about transparent data encryption, if we expand system databases, the master databases, security, and certificates, here it is. So there's a server cert. We need to get that onto our destination instance, which is going to be eval2. And it's not over there because if we hit the connect button here, let's just drop this down and get a connection over here to eval2. And let's do the same thing. We can see we do not have Nugget Demo DB over here. So if we drop down system databases, master, head into security, and certificates, there are no custom certificates that we created here. So let's do it. Let's open up our script called TDE restore, and we're just going to first back up that server cert. So let's just make sure that we're connected here to eval. Okay, we are. We're connected to our eval instance, so that's good. So we're going to back up that cert. And what that'll do is that'll create our certificate file and the private key that it's encrypted with and store them both right here. So here they are. There's our server cert. There's our private key file. Now it's just a matter of getting a connection over to our eval2 instance, making sure we're in the master database, and running the create certificate from those exact files and specifying our decryption password that we use to encrypt it with. So we hit that, hit execute. Now if we just refresh our certificates down here in our master database on our eval2 instance, we should see it over there. Perfect. Now, the only other thing we need to be aware of in our case, because again, our NuggetDB database is a little bit special, is that it's also a contained database. So you'll want to make sure that at the instance level on your destination instance, if it is a contained database, that is turned on. So if you go to the advanced settings here at your instance level, you can see it's off, which it is by default. So I'm just going to turn that on, and now we should be free of any errors from doing a restore of our specific Nugget Demo DB database onto our eval2 instance. So let's make this happen. Let's right-click on databases on our second instance, choose Restore Database, and now we're not going to be able to specify a database because this is just enumerating the local server that you're on. So we need to choose Device, Browse, and based on a file here, we're going to hit Add, and we're going to browse first to our most recent full backup. So that's going to be inside of our backup directory, inside of our copy only directory, and it was the Nugget Demo DB underscore full underscore 2 dot back. We'll hit OK, and now that's going to be our first one in the list. We'll hit add, and now we want to add our differential and all of our transaction logs. So I'm just going to go right into our Nugget DB Demo DB folder, and I deleted anything prior to our most recent differential, so that way it was easier to navigate around in here. So we've got our most recent differential and all of our transaction logs since then. We'll hit OK, and that looks good. We'll hit OK, that'll add them all in. Now I didn't grab our tail log backup, that was in the default backup directory. We could have grabbed that as well, but I'll just skip that just to show you we can go up to a specific point because that didn't break the chain, not including that. But here it is. So we just basically manually filled all this up. Now we can analyze the backups, ensuring we have the right ones, and everything looks good. So we're going to restore it from our Nugget Demo DB database here in our backups to our Nugget Demo DB here on our second instance. The other thing we need to be really wary of is our file locations, especially if we're restoring to a separate instance on the same machine as we are here, because the files are going to still point to the exact same data files. So we would be overriding, although it wouldn't let us because this database is live and operational, so those files are in use, but we would get an error. So what you can do, nice easy way to do this, is hit relocate all files to a specific folder, or you could give each specific file its own name in here. So to keep this simple, I'll just say relocate them all here to the default folders on our eval2 instance, and we're good. So the only other thing we need to do here is go over our options. Everything else looks good here. We don't have to worry about any of this stuff. So let's hit OK, and it'll do the same thing. It'll first apply the fold and the backup, then all of our transaction logs, and we should see it come online here inside of our eval2 instance. And there it is. So after a little bit here, it took about 5 minutes to do apply all the differential and all the transaction logs. But once it's done, it lets us know that it's done. We hit OK here, and there's Nugget Demo DB in our separate instance, error-free. Now let me run through the Transact SQL to do restores. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and it's good to look at Transact SQL here too because you can kind of see how it works in slow motion. So what happens is, in our case of moving it from our eval instance to our eval2 instance, we did a restore database. The first thing we did is our full backup, and you always want to specify with no recovery if you have more backups to restore after your initial one. So in our case we do because we have full differentials and logs, so we want to specify with no recovery. And because we're moving this across instance, we also need to specify where we're going to put the data files. So we specify the data file name followed by where it lives. So here's our primary data file, and then here's our data and data2, which live on the D drive. And this time, rather than what I did in the interface where I just said relocate them all to a specific directory, makes it easy in the interface. But from here, I kept the structure the same as our initial database, same locations, I just appended an eval2 instance to the end of the database name for each one. So the next thing we would need to do then is specify our differential backup, where it's coming from. And so we just do a restore database, again, same name of the database that you're working with from disk, specify the location. By the way, this is the wrong differential. This would not work with our full backup because we've been automated. So we would need to do this one right here. So let me just copy this. And there we go. Now we're using the right backup. And again, specify no recovery because we have transaction log backups to restore. So here's all our transaction log backups. There's a ton of them. And you just want to make sure that you specify no recovery after every single one until the very last transaction log backup. So if you did do a tail log backup, that's what it would be. You would restore your tail log backup last and then do not specify with no recovery. If you didn't do a tail log backup, then just make sure on the very last log that you apply that you do not put with no recovery. That way the database comes online. Now let's take a look at point-in-time restoration. Neat stuff, easy to do in Management Studio, and let's just overwrite the existing Nugget Demo DB database that we just brought up on eval2. Let's say that we wanted to restore back to a point in time because something malicious happened, or a developer forgot a where clause in the production database nonetheless. So if we head into tasks, restore database, you can see our last backup taken is usually what we restore to, which in our case was 130. In fact, if we head into our folder down here, our backup strategy directory, you can see 130 was the last backup. So let's say that at 12:43 something bad happened. So if we hit the timeline here, the default up to the last backup taken, so it would take us to 130. But if we choose specific date and time, you can go back. You can choose your date, choose your time you want to attempt to restore to, and then your timeline interval here for a visual will show us what we're capable of restoring to. You can go and view out from weeks all the way in to hours. So let's scoot back a little bit here, and let's say that something bad happened right around this time. So let's say, and if you want to get specific here, you can just type in 42. So let's say we want the database in the exact state that it was at 12:42 p.m. because we figured out, looking at the data and logs, that something was ran at 12:43 to mess up the data. All right, so we'll hit OK here, and that's all there is to it. Now let's actually go to Files and Options here because we want to overwrite, and we don't need to take a tail log backup since we're going to a specific point. Everything else looks good. We hit OK, and now it's just going to restore like anything else. And there we are. So now we're restored back to the point where the database was at 1242. Now, the last couple of things I want to show you here is really for those special circumstances where you either have a backup strategy that spans files and file groups, or you have a corrupt or damaged file or page and you want to recover without having to go through the pain of restoring from a backup. So let's right-click on NuGet DemoDB, head into Tasks, and restore once again. This time we want to choose Files and File Groups. So from here, you choose where it's going. Again, we're going to overwrite NuGet DemoDB, and then where it's coming from. So if we do from database here, it is again going to list all of our most recent backups, our valid backups. Not only that, but it zooms into the backups. So here's our full backup and all the files within them. So this is kind of neat because rather than having to restore our entire full and then our differential, we can just say, hey, we've got a file out there that's damaged or corrupt and we need to restore it. We can just restore the specific files that we're working with. So kind of neat that we can do that. And that could save a lot of time, especially if you have a large database. Also, at the file group level, you can choose from device. And let me hit add here. I actually did a file group backup of our old data file group that we created back in our backup nugget. And here it is. So here's old data file group. I did a full backup of the old data file group. And there it is. You can see that our type here is file group. So everything from here on out is pretty much the exact same. As far as options go, you can overwrite, you can prompt, and then you can also specify your file directories to restore as, and then your states if you want to leave it. This is a little bit different because we don't have to specify tail logs and all this stuff. You just specify your states. So instead of being in a dropdown, they have it all broken out here. But here's restore with recovery, with no recovery, and with standby. Now, what about page restores? Very easy to do, same process. Just right-click on your database, head into Tasks, Restore, and choose Page. And if users are complaining they're getting errors, corrupted page errors, or things of that nature, then you may want to come in here, run a check database pages. This will run through the database that you have selected up here and list in here any pages that are damaged or corrupted. So that'll find them for us. And then all you need to do is choose your backup that you want to extract your page out of, click OK, and it'll restore it in no time. Much faster, again, than restoring from an entire backup. Alright, so in the CBT Nugget, we got familiar with restoring databases. We started off with learning how to restore from a backup strategy on the same instance and overwrite the existing database. So we saw how to do so using a full differential and transaction log backup strategy, and we saw doing so through Management Studio gave us a nice history of our backup sets that we could choose from. We also got familiar with some options, and then we took a look at how to take that database and restore it on a separate instance. And not just any old database, one that was encrypted and contained. So we saw what we needed to do to get our certificate over to that new instance and then set up any database or instance level settings that would prevent any errors from happening. So once we got that over there, we took a look at how to do point in time restoration, a really easy way to do that using Management Studio to specify a point in time to bring our database up from. We then also saw how to do file group, and page restores. Great ways to restore either piecemeal using file groups and stages or to restore from corrupted files or pages. I hope this has been informative for you, and I thank you for viewing.